This is ABTV, Animal Bites Television.
Snake bites are certainly one of the most feared things on the planet. But are they as bad as people think? Today, we're gonna find out. God, I always hate that feeling of, ow, ow, oh gosh. Did you see that sucker he just came out and he did not mess around. Now see, what you can tell right now is that it's a food aggression bite. You can see it's sunk its teeth in, it's coiled around. In its mind right now, it's thinking, oh gosh, that really does hurt. But I tell you what, every time I touch the snake, it lights me up. Ow, you can just see. And it's a rapid fire bite too. You can just see, it just doesn't want to have anything to do with people whatsoever. And again, this guy will probably really mellow out as it gets older. But as a baby, it's just, you know, oh gosh, sucker. And it's got a pretty big head for a little snake, and you can see how long of a strike range it has. So again, you don't want to get too close to your face. Gosh, I tell you, every time you almost get bit by a snake, no matter how many times you get bit, you still have that kind of tingling feeling like, holy cow, and ow, and there it goes. Now, Amazon tree boas are always just pretty apt to want to bite, and they do have some pretty big teeth. So when they do hit you, it is a little bit more tough than, say, a snake this size. If you really look at this thing's head, it's really not that big of a head. But when you get bit by them, those big teeth, and that's the reason for that is these guys will spend a lot of time, especially when they're older, are going to spend a lot of time up in the canopy, up in the trees. And of course, their prey is going to be birds.
Well, I hadn't seen that yet, so I'm kind of like dodging up here, like what's about to happen next? My name is Clayton Walker. I'm the teaching pastor here at Raider Church. If we haven't met, pumped you are here tonight. Hey, do you ever notice on social media that like we post what we want other people to see? Like we'll get in the perfect light and take 1,000 pictures and then put just the right filter on that picture to make ourselves look the best that we possibly can. Because when we put things out on social media, we want people to be impressed with us and think like we've got it all together, except for those of us that like post how terrible our day is and like cuss everybody out and maybe you do that too. But most of the time, we want people to look at us in this good light or have this good impression of us. And so sometimes we crop out what we don't want other people to see. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Here's some pictures from social media for me. This is a picture of my wife and my daughter. That wasn't there. That wasn't near as strong as I was expecting. I was expecting like all of us at once, like in unison, to say, "Oh yeah, okay, there." That makes me feel a little bit better. So here's a picture. I walk in. It's Monday. It's my day off, and my wife and my daughter are asleep taking a nap, and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, this is perfect." And so what do? I get out my phone. I take a picture. But here's what I do first. I zoom in. Because the floor all around here is covered in clothes and toys and all kinds of stuff. So to make it look more impressive, I zoom in so you can't see everything else. I know none of you have ever done that before, okay? So let's go to the next one. So this looks sweet, right? Okay, this is my son Levi, he's 9. My son Coben, he's 6. He's about to turn 7. And my daughter Nixon, she's 3. And so they say, hey, we want to camp out on the floor together. We want to all sleep together, like next to each other. And we're like, okay, sure, yeah, we'll try that. And so we get them all together on the floor, like we make this pallet for them, they're laying down together, and it's like this super cute, just amazing moment, and we take this picture, but a couple minutes later, they're fighting. No, you move over. Yeah, I mean, they're fighting over the blankets and the pillows, and they won't stop talking, and they won't stop fighting. And so they took this super cute moment, and they ruined it, okay? They ruined it. And so then we had to put them in their own beds, and everybody's crying because they're upset because they didn't get to spend the night together and all that kind of stuff. So that happened just like 2 minutes after this picture. They were already in their own beds. Okay, let's go to the next one. So this is a typical Christmas shot. our Christmas picture from last year. And I know all of you look at this and you're like, oh, look at this amazing family. Like, they've got it all together. Like, they just showed up and like took this picture, and it was one, and all it took was one shot. Like, we just sat there and like this came out. That's not at all what happened, okay? Like, when we take a family picture, we have to perfectly time everything. Like, we have to know when the picture's it's got to be later in the afternoon, because we need Nixon to be able to lay down for her nap around 1 o'clock and be up by about 3:30, so that there's a good hour between the time she gets up and the time we take pictures, because we know that's about how long it takes her to get out of her crabby, like terrible mood from taking her nap. And so it can't be too close to nap time. It's got to be just far enough away from nap time to where she'll be in a better mood, and she's had her snack and all that kind of stuff. So we'll show up, and we're trying to take our Christmas picture, and as we're doing it, we're sitting here, and the whole time I'm saying, Coben, stop smiling like that. Like, stop doing that. Like, stop messing around. Like, you got to smile. Levi, that smile's weird. Like, stop smiling like that. Like, you're what are you doing with your face? Like, stop doing that. Like, stop. Nixon, you've got to stop crying. Like, if you don't stop crying, I'm pulling out threats. Like, then we're not going to go get ice cream. Okay, well, then they're all crying because I've threatened them about not going to get ice cream. So now I've got to bribe them. Okay, well, if you'll stop crying, if everyone will smile, then we'll go get ice cream after the picture. And so everybody smile. 1, 2, 3, smile, 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 smile. And then like 100 pictures go off, like just to get the one shot right here for the Christmas picture that everybody sees, that everyone gets in the mail, and they're like, oh, isn't that so cute? They've got it all together. No, we don't. I mean, it's a nightmare. This is a nightmare to try to do this. We had our Christmas pictures again this past weekend, and it was a nightmare. Like, it takes so much work and effort just to get this one picture so that everybody, when they look, they're impressed. And what do we normally do, though, when we see other people's stuff? Like, when we look at their feed, when we look at their posts, their pictures, we often will compare ourselves. What's going on in our world, like what's going on in my reality, like in my behind the scenes, I compare to their highlight reel. Like the one picture out of 100 that's been cropped and doctored and filtered and everything, I compare my behind the scenes, my reality, to other people's highlight reel. Mark Twain said this about comparison. He said, comparison is the death of joy. Comparison is the death of joy. And one of the things, social media is great, but one of the things social media has done is amped up our level of comparison. We look at other people's pictures, other people's posts, and we compare ourselves to their life, and we're either really upset because my life is not like theirs, supposedly. Or we feel really great, like, my life's a lot better than theirs, so I feel really great. Comparison is the death of joy. So what happens when we compare our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel? And how do we stop doing that? Well, if you got a Bible, turn to Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13, Numbers chapter 14. If you're not familiar with the Bible, go to the very beginning, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, okay? And that's where we're going to be. Numbers chapter 13 and 14. If you don't have a Bible, the verses will be on the screen, but you can also go to raiderchurch.com on your web browser on your phone. The verses are there. You can follow along with us with the points and the verses and everything. It's all there for you. So Numbers 13 and 14 is where we're going to be. I'll set it up for you here in just a second. But in case you weren't here last week, we're in the middle of a series called Snake Lies, where we're just examining the lies that you and I believe. Maybe we don't even realize it. But we're looking at the lies that you and I buy into and the way that it affects our life. And we're looking at what does God's word have to say? We talked about this last week, that truth is our counterattack, that when lies begin to attack, truth is our counterattack. And so we're looking at God's word. We're looking to the truth to help us counterattack the lies that our enemy, that Satan wants to feed us. And so in this series, we're trying to overcome the lies of the enemy, the lies of Satan, with the promises, with the truth of God. So Numbers 13 and 14, here's what's happening. They are on the edge of the promised land. God has promised since Genesis 12 and this promise to Abraham. If you know your Bible, he's promised him, hey, I'm going to bless you, Abraham. I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to multiply your descendants. And if you know the Bible very well, you know that Jesus came from the line of Abraham. But part of this blessing that God gave to Abraham was that he was going to multiply his descendants and he was going to give them this land, this promised land. And the Israelites held on to this promise from God like it was the main part of this promise that they held on to, this idea of this promised land that God had promised to their forefathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he had promised that he was going to give to them, that would be their home and would be the place where God would bless them and turn them into a great nation. And so they held on to this promise. And they're on the edge. That God's delivered them out of the hands of the Egyptians. They were in slavery to the Egyptians for 400 years. And now God's delivered them through some miraculous signs and wonders, showing his power over all the gods of Egypt, showing that he alone is God. And so God says over and over and over again, I rescued you with a mighty hand. I rescued you through signs and wonders and miracles so that you would know that I alone, the Lord, am God. And so he's delivered them, he's rescued them. They've been walking, God's given them the 10 Commandments, he's given them his law, and now they're on the edge of the promised land, just about to go in, just on the other side of the Jordan River. They're about to go in. And God tells Moses, hey, I want you to get a leader from each tribe, from all the 12 tribes, and I want you to send them into the land of Canaan, and I want you to send them out as spies to go and inspect the land. To go and look what peoples live on this land. What are their cities like? Are they fortified or not? And go out and inspect the land. And so the spies go out, all 12 of them, they go out. Each one is selected from each tribe. They go out and they come back. And here's where we are, Numbers 13 and 14, where they come back and here's what they report to Moses. Check this out. This was their report to Moses. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it is indeed a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey, just like God promised. Here's the kind of fruit it produces, and it showed them this huge fruit that the land would produce. It says, but the people living there, here is their report, the people that are living in the promised land that God has promised to the Israelites, but the people living there are powerful. And their towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. The Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites, Jebusites and Amorites live in the hill country. The Canaanites live along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan Valley. But Caleb, one of the spies, one of the leaders from one of the tribes, Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Let's go at once to take the land, he said. This is Caleb talking. We can certainly conquer it. But the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. We can't go up against them. They are stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes there. And all the people we saw there were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, or in other words, compared to them, we felt like grasshoppers. And that's what they thought too. So here's what I want you to see about comparison. Very first thing. Comparison distorts your identity. Comparison, when you compare yourself to someone else, it will always distort your own identity. What do I mean by that? It will distort the way that you see yourself. It will distort the things that you believe about yourself. It will distort those things, like it'll cause you to see yourself in a different way in light of the people or the highlight reel or the situation that you're comparing to. It will distort your identity. You remember what they said? If we go in there, they're bigger than we are. They're stronger than we are. They've got these huge cities. They've got these walls. It's fortified. We can't do that. We can't take this land. Like, we can't do that. Like, You know, God had to be saying, since when did that ever matter? Like, since when did it ever matter what you could do? Since I delivered you from Egypt, it's always been about what I can do. But they get stuck, they get caught comparing themselves to the peoples that live in this land. And as they compare themselves, it begins to distort their identity, what they believe about themselves, what they believe about who they are. I mean, can't you just hear it? Can't you feel it? We're like grasshoppers to them. In other words, we're weak. There's nothing, we can't stand up to them. Can you hear the insecurity coming out there? You ever felt insecure? When you look at someone else, when you look at someone else's highlight reel, and you start buying this lie, you start feeling insecure. Man, they're bigger than I am. They've got more money than I do. They drive a better car than, if only I had that car, if only I had the car that they had. If only I had the boyfriend that they had. If only I had the girlfriend that he has. If only I had that kind of money. If only I had that job. If only I was from that city. The list goes on and on and on. When we compare ourselves to someone else's highlight reel, it begins to distort our identity, what we believe about ourselves and who we believe that we are. And we start doing what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where our identity begins to be wrapped up in what we have and not whose we are. And you know your identity is wrapped up in the what you have when you constantly are comparing yourself to other people. If only I was like this, if only I had that. It's a lie from Satan. And what's so amazing about Satan, he's so crafty, is that instead of saying, you don't have this, you aren't like this, he makes it more personal. And the chatter that you hear in your mind is not accusatory. No. It's a much more personal than that. He turns it into I. I'm not like that. I don't have that. I'm not strong enough. We aren't big enough. I don't have that kind of money. Satan is very crafty with the way that he distorts our identity. And he starts that chatter in your mind. And that's where the battlefield is. It's in our mind. That's where Satan is lying to us, and that's where we're buying into the lies, that our identity is wrapped up in what instead of whose. But as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the what that we have changes every day. But whose we are never changes. And so why would we ever determine who we are or how we view ourselves in light of what we have or we don't have? It makes a whole lot more sense to look at our lives and look at ourselves and view ourselves through the way that God's word says we should view ourselves, and that's whose we are, whose we belong to. You see, this leads to a really big problem. This idea of comparison, it leads to a huge problem. Because we want everybody to be so impressed with us. It leads to us having major issues in our life, or maybe major problems in our life, or major hurts or damage in our life that we never let anybody else know about. Because we can't ever be real with someone. We can't ever be not okay with other people because we're constantly concerned about the way people see us. And so instead of getting help and experiencing healing from the hurts and the damage and the things that we struggle with, we continue to put up this fake exterior, this false front. And instead of being genuine with the people around us and being real, we're fake. And it just leads to a shallow existence. And it leads to never getting healing from the hurts and the damage that we've experienced. And even if that's not you, and you don't have that kind of hurt or damage in your background, this desire for everyone to be impressed with us, this trap, this lie of comparison, keeps us, most of us, from experiencing real, genuine community. Like we may have some good friends, but we don't experience biblical, true community that is life-giving and life-changing. Because we're afraid. We're afraid for people to get to know the real us, the real me, the real you. Comparison distorts your identity. It robs you of your joy. And it prevents you from experiencing genuine community. But not only that, it leads to something else. Check this out. Let's keep going. We're now in Numbers chapter 14, starting in verse 1. And it says, so the whole community began weeping aloud, and they cried all night. Their voices rose in a great chorus of protest against Moses and Aaron. If only we had died in Egypt, or even here in the wilderness, they complain. Why is the Lord taking us to this country only to have us die in battle? Our wives and our little ones will be carried off as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? Wouldn't it be better for us to go back into slavery to Egypt? Then they plotted among themselves, let's choose a new leader and go back to Egypt. You see, comparison distorts your reality. And that's the second thing I want you to see, is that comparison distorts your reality. You notice that the Israelites, because they're comparing themselves to all these people that live in this land that God had promised to them. I mean, they're on the edge. They're on the line. I mean, they're right there. God's promised that he was going to give it to them, that he was going to enable them to take this land. That this is where he was going to bless them and multiply them and turn them into this great nation. They're right on the edge of what God has for them. And because of comparison, they're ready to turn back. And they start presuming that it would be better for them to go back to Egypt. Like it would be better for them to go back into slavery to the Egyptians. You see, they forgot. Because of comparison, because of comparing themselves to these people, they forgot what God had done for them. They forgot how God had delivered them. They forgot the miraculous things that God did to get them to this point. They forgot the promises of God that this was a land that they were going to occupy, that they were going to inherit. They forgot. Comparison always distorts your reality. It distorts your past. And because of that, because it distorted their past, because they forgot about everything that God had done, it robbed them of the joy of that moment. It robbed them of what God had for them in the present. It robbed them of what God had for them in their future. They were comparing themselves, and it distorted everything they saw and the way they saw it. In fact, they even begin to presume upon God's intentions, like, God just let us out here to die. completely distorted view of reality. You see, when you're comparing yourselves to other people, when you're taking your behind the scenes and you're comparing it with everyone else's highlight reel, it will distort your view of your reality. You'll forget the things that God has done for you in the past, and you'll miss out on what God has for you in that moment. In that moment, they're right on the edge of what God has for them. And they end up missing out completely. All because they were comparing themselves to other people. Example of this, I was here in Lubbock during the great blizzard of 2016 or whatever. Was it 2015? I can't remember if it was December or January, but anyways, it was this massive blizzard we had here in Lubbock less than a year ago. And I mean, just feet and feet of snow. It was crazy how much snow we had here. And of course, I've got kids, I've got boys, so we go outside and we're playing in the snow and we're having a snowball fight and we played some snow football and we're trying to build this snowman. And so I've got them all out there and we're, rolling up the snow and packing it in and trying to build this snowman. Well, we didn't get very far. We got the base and we got the next part, and that was kind of it, okay? So that was all we got. So sure enough, we go inside. We've had a great day. We've had fun. Like we've been playing in the snow, and it's been a great day. And all the kids are at home. Like I'm not working. We just a great day. And go inside later that day, and for the next couple of days, what do I see? Post after post after post of all the things that people did out in the snow. So I thought I had a good time, but when I started looking at what everybody else did, I realized, well, I didn't have nearly as good a time as other people did, because these people are making like entire tunnel systems underneath the snow, like seriously, like creating whole cities out of the snow that was here in Lubbock. I had one friend that made this gigantic slide for his kids to slide off of from their roof onto the ground. I was like, my God, that was a great idea. Like then I saw another ramp, like something out of the X Games or something, where people had a sled on the back of a truck and were driving people around, and they would throw it just perfect to where the sled would hit a ramp and they would go flying in the air and off into the snow. It was something out of the X Games. I couldn't believe it. And so I'm looking at all these posts. I'm thinking, man, I suck as a dad. I thought we had a good time, but clearly we didn't. I mean, clearly it was a terrible day, because look at what everybody else is doing. You see, it begins to distort your view of reality when you compare yourself to other people. And that was just joking, but listen, that's true for me too. In all seriousness, when I listen to other pastors or other speakers, I think, oh, I could never do that. I'll never be as funny as that guy. It'll never be as powerful as that guy. It'll never have the same results as that person. It'll never grow like this person. I'll never reach like these people. The comparison goes on and on and on. And if I give into that, if I buy into those lies, then not only do I miss out and I forget what God has done in the past, what He is doing now, right here. If I'm not careful, I'll miss out on what God has for me, just like Israel did. So what do we do? Like, what do we do when we are struggling with comparison, when we're tempted to compare ourselves to someone else? What do we do? Let's keep going. This is Numbers chapter 14, verse 6 through 9. It says, 2 of the men who had explored the land, Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh. So there's 12 spies that go out. Okay, 10 of them are bringing back this bad report. But Caleb and Joshua were different. Notice, it says Joshua and Caleb, it says they tore their clothing. They're upset with this report. They're upset, they're broken at this bad report that the other guys are spreading around. And they said to all the people of Israel, watch this, the land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land. Just like God promised, it's a wonderful land. And if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into that land, and he will give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord. And don't be afraid of the people of the land. They are only helpless prey to us. That's a different interpretation that Caleb and Joshua have of the situation, wouldn't you? Don't you think? I mean, the other ones are coming. We're like grasshoppers. They're gonna crush us. They're gonna destroy us. We can't take the land. We can't do it. Caleb and Joshua, for some reason, think they're helpless prey to us. They have no protection. But the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. You see, Joshua and Caleb go out. They see the exact same thing that the other 10 guys did, but they respond completely different. They've got confidence. They believe they can take the land. They believe that they can take over these people, their enemies. Was it because they were confident in them? They had all this confidence in themselves? Like, did Caleb and Joshua just think, no, they're wrong, we're actually bigger and stronger than they are, and so we can go and fight. There's more of us than there are of them, so we can go and fight them? No, that's not what it was. They didn't have all this confidence in themselves. That's not why they thought they could take the land. They didn't have this incredible view of themselves, such this high view of themselves that they thought, oh, no, we can take them. That wasn't the source of their confidence. Why were Joshua and Caleb so confident? They trusted in God. They trusted in God's ability. They knew what God had done, where he had brought them from, and so they trusted in God's ability. So when you're faced with a temptation of comparing your reality to someone's highlight reel, instead of doing that, here's what I want you to do. Compare your reality to God's ability. Compare your reality to God's ability. You see, Caleb and Joshua didn't come back and say, no, listen guys, we can take them because we're bigger and stronger. No, they're like, no, we are grasshoppers. Like, we are small. We are weak. We cannot do this on our own. But the Lord is with us. And so we can do it. We can take it because the Lord is with us. And then he says this, they have no protection. Yeah, they may have their fortified walls. They may have their weapons. They may have all of this stuff, but they have no protection because God is with us. And so Caleb and Joshua actually think that their enemies, are helpless before them. Not because of anything about them, but because they trusted in God's ability. And so they interpreted the situation, their reality, they interpreted it in light of God's ability. Instead of looking at their situation and comparing themselves to other people and looking at what they could do, they decided to trust in God. And so here's my challenge for you tonight, is to stop comparing your behind the scenes to their highlight reel. Stop comparing your behind the scenes to their highlight reel. When you hear that chatter, you're not this. You can't do that. If you only had that car. If you only were like her. If you only were like him. If only you just had a little bit more money. Then everything would be good for you. When you start to hear that chatter, remember whose you are. It's not about what you have. Remember whose you are, who you belong to. Remember what God has done, where He's brought you, what He's delivered you from, how He's saved you, how He's rescued you. That God has plans for you. He has a future for you. He wants you to experience His best. You need to remember God's truth. That's your counterattack. When Satan starts that chatter, I'll never be this, I'll never do that, I'll never have that. A few verses later in Numbers chapter 14, you really hear the heart of God as He's speaking with Moses, and He's talking about the Israelites, He's talking about the people. He says, when will they believe me? After all that I've done for them, when will they believe me? When will they stop trusting in themselves? When will they stop buying into the lies of the enemy? When, Moses, when are my people going to believe me? You know what was so sad? Is that entire generation, besides Caleb and Joshua, didn't get to enter the promised land. God had them wander around in the desert until that entire generation died off because they didn't believe, they didn't trust in God. All because they started comparing themselves to other people. They completely missed out on what God had for them because they didn't believe God. They bought a lie. And I don't want that for you. I don't want you to buy a lie and miss out on what God has for you. Miss out on God's best for your life. And so let me ask you, when will you believe God? When will you believe what He says about you? When will you believe His promises? When will you believe His truth? And stop buying that lie. Because here's what you got to understand. The voice that you believe determines the destiny you experience. The voice that you believe will determine the destiny, will determine the future that you experience. The Israelites bought a lie, and that entire generation missed out on what God had for them. But Caleb and Joshua believed in God. And so let me just ask you, how many of you guys know someone named Caleb or Joshua? How many of you guys know just the name? You know someone, you're friends with someone, you know of somebody, someone in your family that is named Caleb or Joshua. Okay, almost every hand went up. If your hand didn't go up, you don't want to participate. So we all know someone named Caleb or Joshua, right? Anybody know someone named, let's see here, Shamua? Not the whale Shamu. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? Shamu, no, I didn't think so. Anybody know someone named Egal? That sounds like something, some bad character from a movie or something like that. What about Palti? Palti, that sounds like the name of a dog. Like, I think that would be a breed of a dog. What about Amiel? Anybody know anybody named Amiel? I didn't think so. Those are just a few of the other spies that went out into the land. Those are just a few of the other 10 that came back with a bad report, that didn't trust in God. They bought a lie. And we don't know their names. But every one of us knows someone named Josh or Caleb. Who are you going to be? Are you going to buy the lie? Or are you going to trust in God? And so when that chatter starts going in your mind, if you were here last week, you know what to say. No, not in my house. Let's pray. God, thank you for your word. God, it's living and active. And I pray that it would come alive and it would be active in us, God, even right now. And God, I pray that you would help us to not buy the lies of our enemy, God, that wants to steal and kill and destroy, that wants to take us out. And so God, help us not to compare our behind the scenes with other people's highlight reel. God, because all that does is distort our identity, it distorts our reality, and it causes us to miss out on what you have for us, God. And so help us to be like Caleb and Joshua and not buy the lies, but trust and believe in you. Help us to compare our reality to your ability. And God, in this moment, God, would you help us? Would you remind us that it's not about what we have, it's about whose we are. In Jesus' name, amen.